So the summer before my senior year of high school, I went up to my dad and said, "Hey, Bull, do you think I could take flying lessons?" Now, this was way out of left field because none of our relatives, and really nobody we knew, was a pilot. And on top of that, we were Vietnamese refugees, so there was really never enough money to go around. But he thought about it for a while, and he said, Ngọc, you want to take flying lessons? Okay, but you have to earn the money yourself." Now, this might seem also really out of left field, except this wasn't the first crazy thing I had ever come to my dad with. There was the time I was 7 years old and told him that I had wanted to become a chemist because I had gone into the medicine cabinet, broken one of those old-fashioned thermometers, and started mixing the mercury with the toothpaste and mouthwash. Fresh breath. Or the time I was 10 and came home all scraped up and told him that I wanted to become Evel Knievel, and me and my friend Andrea had slid down the hills on our bikes behind our houses and fallen into the bayou. So, I suppose he was happy that I had told him something before I did it instead of after. But really, I think also we had just a really crappy year. He had been diagnosed with cancer the year before, and even though his days were filled with chemo and doctor's visits and increasingly bad news, he saw that I was sinking into despair because we had a really close relationship, and he figured that by letting me do this, I could escape his reality for a little while. And as for me, I had been spending the whole year reading biographies of famous women aviators. So my head was full of Beryl Markham and Amelia Earhart. And I just kept thinking how brave and strong and resilient they were. And I figured if I could do what they did, if I could get on top of the clouds, I could get on top of this situation and be brave and strong and resilient for my father. And hey, the money part, that wasn't a big deal. I had a job. I was scooping ice cream at the Marble Slab for $3.35 an hour. And even though the flying lessons were $70 an hour, I did the calculations in my mind, and I figured, it only took 400 or 500 scoops to earn an hour of flying lessons. And also, finding the instructor wasn't that hard, even though it was 1990 and this was before internet and Groupon deals. We lived about 20 minutes away from a private airfield, so I just went to the hangar, and then that's where I found my flight instructor, Vladimir. Now, you have to understand Vladimir. This was 1990, the wall just fell, and he was a very recent immigrant from the former Soviet republics. And, I don't know if, growing up in communism or deprivation, twisted him or something, but he really only had this very Slavic binary way about him, which was, "Da, you do that, you will die." Or, "Niet, you do this, you no die yet." And so, Vladimir and I started these flying lessons, and they all had, every time had 3 parts, which was the on-the-ground instruction, the pre-flight, and then the flight. Now, the on-the-ground instruction was when Vladimir and I squeezed ourselves into this Cessna 150 single-engine prop plane, which, if you can imagine, is kind of like a Honda Fit with wings. And that's where he kind of went over the day's lesson. And then the next came the pre-flight, which is what actually every pilot does before every single flight, which is check the entire plane for structural infirmities. And, that part was actually a problem for me because I am not a detail-oriented person. In fact, years later, in the early days of email viruses, I got one and I decided to send all my work contents an apology letter. And I wrote, "I am so sorry for your inconvenience." But then I forgot that the spell check had changed it to, "I am so sorry for your incontinence." And I sent it to 500 people in my work email contacts. But I gotta tell you, the thought of going 5,000 to 10,000 feet into the air in a sardine can with some crazy Russian dude made me really focus. And I got that D-tier orientation to check out every nut and bolt in that plane, and we were okay. And then came the flying part, which was the amazing part. I mean, just imagine yourself going down that runway, pushing in that throttle and pulling back on the flight wheel. It is awesome. It is like when you are 8 years old and you're pedaling your bike so fast and you suddenly fling your hands in the air. It is amazing and scary and exhilarating all at once. And, you know, the flying lessons really were all about, you know, everything that can possibly go wrong in the air and then everything that you can do to save yourself so that you do not yet die. And so, for instance, one day, Vladimir was teaching me how to turn in midair, and he said, "You will never, ever pull too far back on the wheel, because if you turn and too far, pull the wheel too far back, you will die." Now, the technical term is stall spin, when your plane loses lift and then you start plunging into the ground and spinning wildly around. And just to like emphasize the point, he did that and then started laughing hysterically. And then because I was 17 and really stupid, I started laughing hysterically too, because I was like, what could possibly go wrong with an airplane with no lift spinning wildly to the ground? But he got us out of it, and he said, "Yet no die today." It was great, you know, and that summer was great and terrible at the same time because, you know, my dad's health, it never really got better. But I was so happy that he was there to see me, and that he was always delighting, not discouraging all of my crazy ideas and projects. So even though I didn't escape the fact that my dad would eventually leave me, I did escape gravity for a while that summer, mastering the takeoff. Thank you.